Hello, today we're going to be talking about using air dry clay. So I am going to be using this air dry clay that I purchased online. It is available in some stores in Calgary as well. And this is another brand of air dry clay, Crayola air dry clay, that is really easy to find and really inexpensive. So you're going to need some air dry clay. And I've also grabbed some tools. So I have some clay tools, but most likely people will not have that kind of thing at home. So I just suggest finding some tools that you may find in your kitchen or just in your craft supplies. So a butter knife, a fork, a popsicle stick, a toothpick, anything that's similar to that kind of tool is very helpful to use to sculpt the clay. This tool right here is also super helpful, and you can kind of use like a paper clip. If you unfold it and curve it over, you can make a homemade version of that kind of tool as well. So you're going to want to grab some air dry clay, some tools to use, and some parchment paper to cover your surface, as the air dry clay can sometimes stick to your surface. All right, let's get started. We're gonna make a texture slab and a pinch pot in this video.
So I have grabbed a chunk of my air dry clay, and I also have a little container of water. For the remainder of your air dry clay, you will want to make sure that you seal the package so that the rest of it stays nice and fresh and you can use it for your other projects. All right, so I've covered my surface with parchment paper. That's what I recommend. I don't recommend using it on just your table because it can stick to the table, which can be quite frustrating. I have a clay board covered in canvas here, and so I'm just going to use that instead of my parchment. But for you at home, you want to cover with parchment. And what I'm doing here is I am wedging. Wedging is something that can kind of help me to make sure that the moisture is distributed evenly throughout the clay. And with regular ceramics clay, it helps us to ensure that there's no air bubbles in the clay, because those can be really bad when we're firing the clay, as those air pockets can heat up and then cause the clay to break. But for me, with the air dry clay, I'm trying to distribute the moisture evenly. So what I'm doing here is I've now split my little chunk into two halves. So they're about even sized balls. And I am rolling them into a ball, kind of trying to make them a little bit smoother. And I've added some water onto my surface, my work surface. If you want to add water to your clay, that's what I recommend, either adding the water to your hands or to your surface. All right, time to make the pinch pot. So I'm holding the ball in my left hand, and I take my thumb and I pressed it into the middle of the ball. I pressed it so that there's about a centimeter in between my palm and my thumb of clay. And now I'm using my hand, kind of like a lobster claw, and I'm just pinching around and around, still using my left hand to support the ball. So I'm pinching around and around to create sort of the walls of the pot. So I'm using kind of like an upwards pull motion. I want to make sure that the walls are uniform thickness. So I don't want them to be super thin at the top or super thick at the top, and then different elsewhere. I want them to be all the same. So if I were to cut this pot in half, the walls would be the same thickness all the way down. All right, so then I can kind of just press it down onto my work surface so that it can sit. And then I may have some cracks along the top edge, and so I can use some water to smooth that out. I found that using a popsicle stick, so remember I talked about tools at the beginning of this video, a popsicle stick or possibly a butter knife or any other sort of more flat tool is super helpful in smoothing the air dry clay. Um, so I also suggest that you can kind of use something that allows you to turn your piece. So what was I think it's called a bat. It's just sort of a rotating circle. Um, Most likely you don't have that at home, but you could use a piece of parchment paper or a piece of cardboard so that you can spin your piece. So you can make sure that you are able to view it from all angles, and it just makes it easier to work. So you'll smooth out the lip of your pot, and then that's how to make a pinch pot. So I've noticed that my lip of my pot is sort of wavy, and I want to just flatten it out a bit. And what I've been doing with the popsicle stick has just been fixing up the cracks. So what I can do is I can use my work surface. I can flip the pot over and just kind of gently tap it, and maybe wiggle it back and forth. And then it will kind of allow the flat surface that I'm working on to flatten out that top rim or that top lip. It also lets me see the bottom of the pot and see if there's any cracks or things that need smoothing. So you can also trim the lip of your pot if you're finding that it's too tall or too wavy in certain parts. So I'm just using this pin tool, or at home you could use possibly a butter knife or a toothpick, and I'm just sort of shaving off a little bit of parts of the rim there so that it's sort of more even with the remainder, and it also makes it a lot more flat. So that is an option. You do have to make sure you're supporting the wall of the pot with your other hand, the hand that isn't holding the tool, as the air dry clay is a little bit more tricky to do this with. So that is another technique that you can use when making and perfecting your pinch pots. On the other hand, you may want to leave some of the little imperfections on your pot. So this is a pinch pot that I made and I attached some little legs to it. And I left the wavy edge because I thought it looked cool and I thought it made sense with all of the texture on the pot as well. So you can make decisions based on sort of what's going on with the clay. All right, pinch pot is done. Let's do the slab. So I've added some water to this clay as it was just sort of sitting out while I was making the pinch pot. So I put some water on my hands and I put some water on my surface. And now I'm going to do some wedging. So I'm just pushing the clay down and picking it up and then repeating, pushing down, picking up, pushing down, picking up, trying to get the moisture content of the clay to be uniform and even. So I will do that for a while. Let's speed up the video. All right, so with the pinch pot, I made a ball. With the texture slab, I'm going to make a pancake. So I'm pressing down with my palm on my clay, and then I'm just making sure to pick up the clay and sort of move it so that it doesn't get stuck to my work surface. You can also use something to roll the clay. Like anything round will do. You could use like a wooden dowel or a rolling pin for baking. I had this little roller that was part of the ceramic tools set that I bought. Um, you could use, I wonder if maybe like a harder cardboard roll might work. So if you do have a roller, it's great. Um, and if not, try to find something that might work for rolling out your slab. So I want my slab to be not too thin and not too thick. So that's about how thick it is. It's about a centimeter So a lot of times ceramic artists will use slabs to build things like a cylinder or a cube in order to, create something, a vessel of some sort. Okay, what I'm doing here now is I'm grabbing some different textured objects that I can press into the clay. You can also grab plants or um, flowers. You can press those kinds of things into the clay as well. But I've mostly grabbed objects that I can use to create texture. And now I'm just going to use the objects that I've collected to create texture on my slab. So I'm hoping that you can do at least 5 different textures on your slab. And you can use different objects or the same objects, but just maybe in a different way to create some different textures. So let's speed up the video and we'll see how we're doing at the end. So once you have filled up your slab with all of the different textures, you can take a photo of your work, both your pinch pot and your slab, and save it because that's your sketchbook assignment for this lesson. If you want to save your slab, in the next video, I'll show you what you can do with your slab. Um, but if you don't, then you can just crumple up your slab and put it back in the container of your air dried clay to save it up to use for something else. This was just purely a practice activity. And here is all of my lovely textures. I'm really happy with how some of them turned out and might be using them in my my finished piece. Thanks for watching.